It might be a household name now, but drywall wasn't always so popular. Until the 60s, most walls and ceilings in new construction homes were actually made from plaster. But eventually, drywall found its mark and proved itself to be the most convenient material to build homes with. When someone who isn't in construction sees drywall, they almost always think to themselves, "There's no way I can do that." But it isn't as tough as it looks, but it does take time. So let's go over some of our basic ins and outs of drywall. Now, the first thing you need to do before diving into a drywall project is estimate how many sheets you'll need. Thankfully, drywall is pretty inexpensive, usually under $1 per square foot. Drywall comes in different sizes, measured in multiples of 4 feet. For this project, we're using 4x8. As for thickness, the two most common are 1/2 inch thick and 5/8 inch thick. For interior walls, 1/2 inch is most common, but we're going to match the 5/8 inch that we already have existing in the garage. This will give us a nice, smooth wall when we're finished. First, you'll need to measure the square footage of the area, which is the length of the space followed by the height. Multiply those two numbers and voila, you have the square footage. Then divide your square footage by 32. The reason is because each sheet of a 4x8 sheet equals 32 square feet. You'll also want to tack on 20% extra in case of accidents, screw-ups, or unusual shapes. Who knows? Better safe than sorry. So to give an example, let's say the room you're hanging drywall on is 16 foot long. That means the square footage is 128 square feet. Divide that 128 by 32 and you get 4 sheets of drywall. And when you add 20% for coverage, that's almost another full sheet. So in that case, we'll get an extra sheet. Now for this project, we're installing our sheets vertically, where each sheet will cover 3 stud bays. And since there are 8 bays, that means we'll need 3 full sheets, and we'll have a little extra in case we make a mistake. So here we are at our wall. These are the studs, and these are the stud bays. They're 16 inches on center. So one 48-inch sheet of drywall will span 3 studs to give us 48 inches. So our first sheet of drywall will start here on this stud and go to this stud. Now we need to start on the center of the stud, so our next piece of drywall will have some structure behind it where we can screw into it. Now we're not going to use this first bay because it's what they call a special. It's oversized and it's not going to follow our layout. If I did, our first sheet would end right here, and that's no good because there's no backing there. So we're going to start right here and go from there. We're going to take a quick look at the tools we're going to use for this project. So we've got our rasping jab saw, which I'm going to call a drywall saw, our razor knife. We're going to use 1 5/8 drywall screws since we're putting up 5/8 drywall. And your level, our drill with the Phillips head bit, and our step ladder. All right, so we're moving this into position. We've got to work our way around the garage door opener. And we're bringing it over to our stud here. So this is where we line up. So all we need to do is hop this up on the curb and check out our layout. So we've got it in place and we're ready to screw it down. So in general, we're going to go about 6 inches on center around the perimeter. And in the field, which is the part that's not on an edge, we're going to go 1 foot on center. So how do we find these studs that are behind the wall? Well, if you look closely, there's markings. These markings are 16 inches on center. They'll tell us exactly where the studs are. So let's put a screw in and see if it hits it. Look at that. Success. Okay, so here's something you got to remember. When you're screwing in drywall screws, you want it to go beyond the surface, but you don't want to break the skin. So you got to get it in there just right. So this one's sticking out a little bit. So I'm going to stick it in a little bit more. Now the screw gun, you heard that ratcheting sound. That's the amount of tension it's going to put on it. So if I tighten up that tension a little bit, go into a higher number, it'll put that screw in a little deeper. So let's try it. Now it's sunk in there and it's good. So let's try one on the edge. Now our drywall's held in place. So this screw here, 16 inches in on the stud behind it, these screws are called in the field because they're not on an edge and they're not as tight on center. So these are 1 foot on center. So let's just estimate, use the markings and put another screw in. See? Perfect. All right, so now we're going to continue down the edge, every 6 inches. So once again, 12 inches in the middle, 6 inches on the outside. All right, this one's all screwed off. Now we're going to move on to the next one. All right, you ready? Okay, now we're going to lift it onto the curb. We're putting it in. There's a little gap there, so I'm going to snug that up and stick a screw in. Always like to get a couple screws in to hold it into place. I'm going to go get one on Margaret's side. Okay, so now we're going to go through the same procedure with this sheet. 1 foot on center in the middle and 6 inches on the sides. And then remember the middle, we have these markings from the factory. Voila, we found a stud. Okay, we're all done with this sheet. Now we're going to move on to this bay here. I need to measure it and make a special piece to fit in there. So what I'm going to do first is measure it and find out what we need to do. So at the bottom here, we have 18 inches. So I'm going to get a measurement at the top, and if it's the same, we can cut a square piece. And then it's 18 up there also. So we're going to cut our piece 18 inches. Now we want to make sure that we leave this special edge at this point here. That's an indentation that lets you put the tape on there. All right, so now we're going to cut our piece of drywall. We're going to come 18 inches off of this edge. This is the factory edge. It's got an indentation here, and that's so you can tape it. So notice how this is dented in. That'll accommodate our tape joint. So what I'm going to do now is mark it out. Now, most of you aren't going to have an 8-foot level hanging around your house, so I'm going to divide it in half, and I'm going to make an 18-inch mark in the middle and on each end. Okay, that's all we need to mark. Now get your knife and your level, and let's make the cut. So what we've got here is the drywall. It has a skin on it with the gypsum underneath it. We just need to score across the skin and cut through it, which isn't a very deep cut, and then we snap the drywall. So here's how you do it. We're lining up with our 18-inch mark. Now you want to be careful and don't rush yourself because you can sever a digit here. Apply pressure and score it. And you continue on down. Now we're going to do this part, or this half. There's our mark. This level isn't quite 48 inches long, but that's okay. And we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, so now we've cut through the skin. So let's lift it up. Okay, so here's our drywall. Now we've got our cut right here. So what we're gonna do is just with a little push or a little tap on the back, it'll snap it. So Margaret, let's do this. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's how it's supposed to be. So now you see, we've cut the skin, we got the gypsum, but then we've got the backing paper, and we need to cut that. So don't cut it from this side. You'll pinch your razor knife, and you'll never get through it and make a clean cut. So we're going to flip it over. So Margaret's going to hold it, and I'm going to show you how to cut it. So you just start with your razor knife, go through, and it's very easy. And that's it. There's our piece. Okay, so let's stick it in there. Now my part needs to match up with the factory edge there. So my part goes on top. So set yours down on the ledge. Okay. And there we go. It's almost perfect. Okay. So you can see it didn't snap perfectly right here, so I'm going to trim that off. Hold that for a second, Margaret. And there we have it. It's a nice tight fit. All we need to do is screw it in, and then we're off to taping. When we hung the drywall, there was a vent here. So now we need to create a hole for the vent. So here's how we're going to do it. We take our drywall saw, and we know this is the general area. So the first thing we're going to do is poke a hole near this stud. Once we find the stud, we're just going to outline it with the saw and make the hole. Here we go. Let's have fun. So there's the edge. Now I'm going to go up. Now we're going to go down and find the bottom of the sill plate, or actually the top of the sill plate will be the bottom of our hole. Now we're going to make the turn at the bottom and go across. So now I just need to trim it up and we'll be all done. Now that the drywall is hung, the next step is to mud and tape the joints. If you notice, there's these seams between the sheets. There are also a lot of screw marks. If you were to texture or paint this wall right now as is, you would actually see those seams as soon as it dried, which would look terrible. So how do we avoid this? With tape and a little bit of mud, that's how. Taping is a key step when drywalling and the bridge between hanging and finishing. It's very important. So let's show you how to do it. The most common tape used is paper tape. It's thin and helps smooth joints. Notice that it has a crease down the center. This is so you can bend it and stick it into corners. We're also going to use a mesh tape today. Now this tape is used for larger gaps that need a little more attention. You'll also use mud for this part of the project. They technically call it joint compound, but us pros just know it as mud. All it is gypsum, dust, and water. Gypsum is a mineral and is the primary ingredient in drywall. Okay, my team for this part of the job is a mud pan, paper tape, mesh tape, all-purpose mud, and some drywall knives. These will come in handy, and they usually come in 4-inch, 6-inch, and 12-inch knives. So let's get started. Okay, so here we go. Here's our mud knives and our tray. We're going to open up our box of drywall mud. Okay, this is a pretty big box, so you're going to use it over and over again. So let me show you how to do it so you can always keep this mud in good condition. Okay, so here's what you do. You can be like a pro. Pull it up and push it down over the cardboard. That way it's easy to get your knife in there, and when you're all done, you'll collapse it back, take all the air out, roll it up, tuck it in, and you'll have this for use later. So we're going to take our mud pan. So this is pretty simple. It's like making pancakes. You just take the mud, scoop it out, put it into the pan. Let's get a couple of good scoops in there. You're going to make a mess, so don't worry about it. Drywall mud cleans up with water. Even if you spill it on carpet, it'll come out. Okay, so now we're just going to kind of mix it up. You just kind of slice down. Kind of loosens it up and makes it a little more liquidy and easier to apply. Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, so here's our first tape joint. First, we got to make sure all the screws are down low enough. You can always check that just by running your trowel down it. So first, we're going to lay a bed of mud in this joint, wide enough to accommodate our tape. So what you do, grab a little bit onto the top of my knife. Then, don't dilly-dally and just go up there and just spread it down. You'll get the hang of it. So we got to get this bed all the way to the bottom. Then we're going to smooth it out and put our tape in there. Now in general, when you're using a mud and a knife, the more severe the angle, the more you're going to take it off, the more flat it is, the more mud you're going to leave on there. So right now, I'm trying to leave a lot of mud. So my angle is pretty flat, as opposed to being sharp like that. So now I'm just kind of smoothing it out, getting ready to put my tape down. This is kind of fun. You'll get the hang of it. It'll be a little awkward at first, but you'll be a pro in no time. So if you spill a little, you just scrape it off, and then you can scrape it there. There's an edge here where you can always clean your blade. Okay, so now I'm going to smooth the top off. I needed just a little more mud to cover up there. Okay. So now we're going to cut our piece of tape and stick it in there. So for this joint, we're using the paper tape. So here's how I like to do it. Get your knife all clean. And we're going to start at the top and we're going to work our way down. So that little center line, put that right at the gap. If you forget where the gap is, you can always just kind of find it with your blade again. So down here I need to find it. There it is, right there. So you just kind of keep that thing centered. Now I'm just kind of poking it into place to make sure it sticks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to really lay it in there. So I'm going to start here and swipe up that way. That way, if I swipe here, it's just going to pull the tape down. So I need that resistance to go up. Okay, so it's in there. Now coming down, we go all the way down to the bottom. And right here, get that right where I want it. I'm cleaning my blade off because I've accumulated some mud on it. Now what I'm going to do, perpendicular, I'm just going to put my knife right against that piece of tape, all the way to the edge. Then I'm just going to pull it, and it'll cut it with the blade. So that's our first piece of tape. Now we have to just work it in. Let's get that top again. Okay, that's looking good. So I'm just going to clean off this excess. So I'm going to put my second coat on now. I'm just going to start right here so I can kind of show you how to do this. Keep your blade at this kind of angle, almost parallel to the drywall. That'll give you a nice thick coat on there. And don't worry if it's not perfect, because it needs to dry. You're going to sand it and you're going to repeat this. You just want to make sure you cover that tape completely. Okay, so this is pretty good. I just need to kind of level it out, take those edges off if I can. But don't go so far down that you expose the tape again. That looks good. Now I'm going to do the top half. So what you usually do is you put the mud in place like that, so you have a big blob there, then you pull it down. So it's kind of a constant adjustment of this blade. The harder you press and the more perpendicular your blade is to the drywall, the less you're going to leave and the more you're going to pull down. So let's show that. Let me just go ahead and show you like I'll overdo it. So say here's your blob of mud. Say I have a perpendicular angle and I'm pulling hard. Boom, I've exposed the tape. So if I take my blob and I do it softer with this kind of an angle, I've coated it. So it's just a combination. You'll get the hang of it. The fun thing about drywall is you can't screw up. If you mess it up, you can just do it again. Or if it's too much of a blob, you come back the next day, you sand it off. So it's fun to play with it and learn how to do it. There we go. That's our first tape joint. Now we're going to move over to here. You can see that this joint has a big gap in it. It's where we're matching up to our old drywall. And up here it's pretty good. You get down here, our piece of drywall is out further than the existing. So there's some framing issue or something going on there. So we need to use this mesh tape, which will hold more mud and it'll span that gap. And we'll be able to smooth it out. All right, I'm going to grab my mesh tape, but I'm going to reload here because I kind of ran out of mud. So we're going to repeat the process here. First, we're going to put our bed of mud down. So what's going to happen here is my mud eventually is going to come out to about here just to make this transition smooth. So I'm going to kind of put some extra there. See, notice how I'm doing this. I'm starting out kind of like this, and then I'm just feeling where I need to leave more mud or draw more mud down further. So there I'm a little bit shy. Okay, that's good enough. The other difference between this type of tape and paper tape is that it's porous. It has holes. So as I put the mud in there, it's going to go through there. Same process here as the paper tape. Here you have the luxury of being able to see through it. Okay, once again, we're going to make a cut at the bottom. So I clean off my knife. Get a 90-degree angle here and just give it a tug. So now we're going to set the tape in the mud. So I'm going to start here at the bottom and go to the top. I can't start at the top and pull down. It'll just pull the tape out. So here we go. Once again, this is light. This is light with a flat angle. Now the very top, it's kind of hard to get up there, so I'm just going to do it really lightly. Okay, then the bottom half, it's just the same thing. I'm just going to set it in there. And that's all there is to it. All right, now we're going to coat it. So notice here at the bottom, I kind of didn't get any mud in the bed there. That's okay. The mud will go right through this tape. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Just like the paper tape, we're going to start at the top and just work our way down. Get the mud on your blade, lay it on there, and work your magic. Work that angle. See, that wasn't enough to cover some of those parts, so I'm going to do it again. Remember, this is kind of a wide gap, and it has some issues about being level, so we're going to probably need a little extra mud. Now the other thing about this joint is, if you remember, the factory edge has a little bit of a recess that allows for the tape and the mud to go over smoothly. In this particular case, this wasn't a factory edge, so we're actually going to have to feather out our mud at the end. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fill my mud trowel up again. So now I'm going to use a bigger blade. This is going to allow me to do more of my feathering that I was just talking about. So we use the same techniques. First put our mud on there, then... Okay, that'll do it for now. We can still see a little bit of the tape, but we'll get that in the next coat. It needs time to dry and set up. So the next step is to deal with these screws that are exposed. So I'm taking a smaller blade. I'm going to show you how to do it. Just takes a little bit for each one. Take about that much mud, put it directly on the nail, and then pull it down with that flat angle. That's it. It's easy, it's fun, and it's fast. You can act like you're a real pro. Sometimes you can do 2 or 3 screws with the same thing. So I'm just going to finish off the rest of the screws and clean up on the way. It's easier to clean up the drywall when it's wet than when it's dry. All right, we're all finished here now, so we're going to let it dry overnight and come back tomorrow. Then we can sand it and put another coat on. It's been 24 hours now, and that first coat of mud is dry. Patience is key. But before you apply the second coat, you have to sand the first in order to smooth out the wall. Make sure you have on a mask because this gypsum dust can be a real problem if you breathe it in. As you sand, go easy over the seams, as you don't want to sand so deep that you dig into the paper that we just laid down yesterday. Okay, so let's get going. So I'm going to take my sanding block, and I'm just going to kind of see how we're doing. There's a little ridge there. Just going to sand it down. It's good. Now I'm just going to get the top real quick. And that's all we need to do to prep this for another coat. But while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and sand down these screw areas. And that's it for the screw holes. Once you hit them once and smooth them out, they're done. We're not coming back to those. So let's move on to getting our second coat here. Okay, here we go. We're all filled up, and let's get to work. So if you notice, I got some gashes and grooves. That's the main thing we want to hit, and we want to feather it out so everything's nice and smooth. One more just light sanding, it'll be done, but let's get this done first. Remember your technique. So the more parallel I am to the wall, the more mud I'm going to leave on there. The object of this coat is to get it looking as smooth as possible. So it just needs a light sanding at the end. If you leave a little ridge, that's okay, because that'll be sanded off. But don't leave any little valleys or grooves, because you'll have to sand much deeper to get those out. One other tip. If I'm trying to level this out, I'm putting more pressure on this edge of the knife. That way it lets this be a lighter, and this is going to scrape all the way down to my surface. That way it feathers out nicer. I'm going to move up to the top now. Now you can see as I'm pulling it down, I'm moving my hand in and out to make it steeper and more parallel. That's to let more or less of the mud go through. Now I'm going to use that technique where I put the pressure on the outside of the blade to get this off and hopefully get a nice smooth transition there. Didn't work, so I'm just going to try it again. And that's it for coat number 2. We're just going to let it dry overnight, and we'll come back, sand it off tomorrow, and it'll be all done. All right, we're at the end of our process. We've hung the drywall, taped it, put a first coat on that, sanded that, put a second coat on, and now I'm going to sand that, and we'll be all done. Now, drywall is one of the pillars of home maintenance work. Yes, it's a lengthy process, but it's worth it. You learn several new skills, and in comparison to hiring construction workers to do it, it's a huge money saver as well. It also looks pretty cool to sit in a room, look around, and tell yourself, hey, I made these walls.